I would now like to introduce the keynote speaker, Dr. Mohammed Musbahu Ibrahim, popularly known as MM Ibrahim. MM is an old friend of mine and very erudite. He's a lawyer, he's an engineer, and he's a doctor. He has studied extensively both in Nigeria and abroad. He went to the great Sorbonne University in France, so he's bilingual as well. In 1998, he was a special assistant to ex-President Obasanjo. And he's done so many things. You know, if I start talking about his CV now, we'll be here for another 1 hour. So let me just quickly summarize a couple of highlights. He has, for example, been chairman of Eleme Petrochemical, which is a very important project in my home state of Rivers. And he's an oil and gas expert, but he's a polymath. He is good at so many things. I mean, he knows about a lot of things. For example, he knows about petroleum. When I say he's an engineer, he's not just a petroleum engineer, he's also an agricultural engineer. He seems to spend half his life studying. So let me hand you over to him now. Dr. MM Ibrahim. What are those editions of MM?
Let me make some few statements before I start my presentation. When I completed my presentation, when I completed the draft early in the week, I sent it to the officials, but I was advised that just like President Buhari said when he came back from the medical vacation in the UK, he said that the unity of Nigeria, has been settled. Therefore, I was told that certain keynote concepts that are designed in my program had been settled. Therefore, I needed to go over them. And what are those keynote concepts that the Pearl people said had been settled? That included my foray or voyage in trying to lay an academic premise upon which you can build the subject matter, which is making reforms work for good governance, the role of stakeholders. I've been told that, and I do appreciate, that yes, indeed, all participants, appreciate, might be in different forms, good governance. We all know what good governance is all about, and reforms. And therefore, I should just go straight to more of an interactive session of my experiences over the years, in the reform process. Therefore, I may have to skip some slides. For those who might be interested in what I consider to be literature review, you can have a complete dossier after this presentation. But essentially, like I said, I made foray into certain jurisdictions so that Nigeria will have, appreciation of what similar states or similar countries all over the world have done in their attempts at making reforms work for good governance, the role of stakeholders. What I tried to do was an introduction, key concepts, reforms, good governance, stakeholders, then the role of stakeholders in making reform works, and my concluding thoughts. But I'm going to skip the first two, and I'll move straight to reforms, and then we'll drive there on. Well, experts in life form systems have long established the imperativeness of change as a constant. Evolutionary transitions from one state to the other occur in both animate and inanimate objects. This could be in the form of self-induced generation or externally induced deformation. The obvious is the compelling need for the system to undergo a movement of some sort towards an intended objective or objectives. For the animate systems, we need to reform. Otherwise, the alternate sedentary existence is a path to fossilization, which means that reform is an imperative, whether we like it or not. If we do not reform, then we fossilize. I took what Wikipedia said about reform. He said it is the improvement of what is wrong, corrupt, or unsatisfactory. Basically, it's a simple, thing about moving from one state to the other, but an improvement of what is considered to be right or wrong. Well, Webster also has a slightly different approach to what reform is. To put a change, to put or change in an improved form or condition, to amend or improve by change of form or removal of faults or abuses, to put an end an evil by enforcing or introducing a better method of course of action. Well, generally, what then are we trying to do when we reform? It is designed for intended consequences, but quite often it may also have unintended consequences. Nigeria has carried out over the years a plethora of reforms over the years. Some have been quite deep and significant. Telecommunications, the monetary policy reforms of the CBN. We saw what happened, because what most of us probably do not appreciate is one of the most successful reforms we had in this country, even beyond the telecommunications, is the monetary policy reform agenda, which gave the CBN an independence of the executive or judiciary. Basically, the CBN governor now and his team can go in there and design a monetary policy without the intervention of even Mr. President. And we saw that play out during the last administration between the CBN governor and the then President Goodluck Jonathan. We're also seeing what has happened in telecommunications, how the reform in the telecom sector has been so deep and significant to national economy that a lot of direct foreign investment came in, and then telecommunication in a significant manner was altered. Other reforms in Nigeria have been deliberately and politically made irrelevant to matters of irritants, excuse the word, or coin it, political. We've also seen why various governments over the last almost 60 years have just paid lip service to reforming the political space, the political structure. Therefore, you can have a reform that is designed to succeed. You can also have a reform that, I believe, is designed not to succeed, but just to give the state, some time in continuing in its path. Of course, we have seen some frustrated by stakeholders. The stakeholders who are supposed to be key, to the reform agenda will just merely take the reform and frustrate it. And this is our example that we have seen with the petroleum sector and also the competition and antitrust reform agenda. The petroleum sector is key for a certain reason, because one of the things, and this is what Margarita asked me to talk about, my experiences in all these reform attempts. One of the objectives of the reform of the petroleum sector, which we had embarked on with Don under late Dr. Lukman, was that although Nigeria is a major oil and gas country, but Nigeria is not an oil and gas producing country. Nigeria is an oil and gas exporting country. Now this is different. These are two different things. We are an oil and gas producing country. We are an oil and gas exporting country. We are not an oil and gas producing country. For a simple reason. Over 90% of Nigeria's production of hydrocarbon is not carried out by Nigerian companies or Nigerians themselves. The multinationals, the IOCs, through what you call the joint venture schemes, where they are the drivers of the process, are the ones that are producing the oil that we claim we produce in Nigeria. I'll give you a simple example. You take the Shell NNPC joint venture. Shell probably has about 30% equity. Shell is the operator. It is the entire Shell system that operates the NNPC Shell joint venture without any participation of NNPC staff, knowledge, equipment, or in any form in the production. What this means, therefore, is in the event where the IOCs were to pack their budgets and move out of Nigeria today, Nigeria will not be in a position to produce up to 100,000 barrels per day. So indeed, we are not an oil and gas producing country. We are an oil and gas exporting country. That was exactly what the reform of the petroleum sector intended to correct, to make Nigeria not only an oil and gas producing country, but to make Nigeria an oil and gas producing, processing, and only exporting processed material out of the country. By so doing, we will domesticate technology, we will keep the funds in the country, and will empower Nigerians. But of course, we also know that it was not made to succeed because the stakeholders whose interest would be affected or altered in a significant manner, therefore frustrated it. So this is one of such examples that we experienced in our attempt at reforming the oil and gas sector. The second attempt was what you call the Competition and Antitrust Law, which essentially was to avoid a situation where one company would dominate an economic sphere to the exclusion of the smaller players. Now, we tried also, but the big boys, the big fishes, will hardly ever allow a competition and antitrust law to exist in Nigeria because they have a few names. If you are to buy any of the commodities that the major players are producing in the country today, you discover that they fix the prices and they really stable out the upcoming entrepreneurs in that field or that product. So this is an example of a frustrated reform agenda by stakeholders. Reforms within the context of today's discourse involve the alteration of a state of being of a system, institution, or process from the present to an improved state. But more significantly, we're here today in major reform, work for good governance. Stakeholders. Now, the role of the stakeholders in major reforms for good governance work. Stakeholder. As a person who has something to gain or lose through the outcomes of a planning process or project. In many circles, these are called interest groups and they can have a powerful bearing on the outcomes of the political processes. The term refers to persons, groups, or organizations that must somehow be taken into account by leaders, managers, and frontline staff. Any group or individual who can affect or be affected by the achievement of an organization's objective is a stakeholder. Phil Robinson's one of the leading authorities on stakeholders' activities roles, defines stakeholders as those who may be affected by or have an effect on an effort. They may also include people who have a strong interest in the effort for academic, philosophical, or political reasons, even though they and their families, friends, and associates are not directly affected by it. Now, we have three different kinds of stakeholders. We have the primary stakeholders that include individuals, groups, or institutions that are to be directly, positively, or negatively affected by the reform process. While the secondary stakeholders, they constitute individuals, groups, or institutions that have to be indirectly impacted positively or negatively, again, by the reform process. And then what are the key stakeholders? These belong to neither of these categories above. They are often the drivers of the reform agenda. They are mostly found at the echelon of the process. Often in public sector, people like Joe Abba, these are government officials. They are the major stakeholders. But then as we're going to see as time goes on, all of us, citizens of the country, are major stakeholders. We are key stakeholders. Now, the World Bank came out with what they consider to be a stakeholders analysis or mapping. It is a process of examining and determining those stakeholders who potentially may have the most positive or negative influence on the process, as well as those who are to be the most affected by the exercise. This enables the drivers to design appropriate strategies of working with stakeholders at different levels of interest and influence. Traditional stakeholder mapping or analysis involves grouping stakeholders into one of the four groups as follows. This is quite interesting because even among the stakeholders, you have different characterization and different characters. You have the promoters. They have substantial interest in the process and exert great influence in ensuring the success of the exercise. These often, like I said, belong to the top echelon of the public service or the institution that is affecting the process. The defenders, although they have vested interest, which can be high in the process, but their actual influencing power is on the low end. They are vested interest quite okay, but then they do not influence the process as much as the promoters. What are the legends? They have no special interest whatsoever or involvement in the process. But if they become interested, they can build a lot of influence. These are people whose voices carry a lot of weight in society, in communities, and in the reform process. And then we have the apathetics. They are not aligned. They have no interest and no influence. Often they are oblivious of the existence of the reform process or exercise. Sit down, look. There are people who are more or less like moose, if you want, excuse the coding. They don't even know that, look, listen, the interesting thing about this is some of them inadvertently find their way as members of reform process, but they only join, as what we say in Hausa, they just, go along with the praise, and dance to the tunes, or political, patronage. These are apathetics. And from my experience over the last 20 years in the reform process in this country, and I believe Haja Baron West and John Kubara will bear me witness, most of the stakeholders that we have had fall into this particular group, which is quite unfortunate. And that is the reason why most reforms in Nigeria fail. And those that succeed, post-reform monitoring, never succeed. And we end up having reforms that, although are there, but do not achieve the objective for good governance, or for which I believe the reform was carried out. So, like we said, the stakeholder partners, what the agents, that is the undesired ones that eventually find themselves, in. You get somebody who is a member of a political party, and he thinks that, government is trying to carry out a reform of maybe telecommunications, and then a committee is set up. They are the first that will jump into the fray. Their own idea is to listen. I've been settled politically. I'll collect my certain allowance. They are there, they don't even understand what goes on, but they are part of the process. They are misrepresenting the people that put them there, or lack of representation whatsoever. And then you have the promoters. Those are often high influence, high interest. You have the low influence, you have the low influence and high interest. These are the defenders. If they're to show interest, then things will happen. Next slide. Therefore, major reforms work for good governance. What should be the role that the stakeholders should play? What essentially are the roles of the stakeholders in the reform agenda? Next slide. Well, we all know that every movement, every organization, every process requires champions. Number one role that the stakeholder should have, is to be the champion of the process. They are still according to the successful reform process for good governance. If the stakeholders do not see themselves as the champion of the process, of the procedure, then we will never achieve success. Number two, the reform process of good governance requires they have to be effective, passionate, and efficient. It's not just enough to be an apathetic, just be part of the process. If they are not efficient, passionate, and efficient about the reform process, then they have no business in there, and the process will just not succeed. Stakeholders should keep an eye on the reform process to ensure its success for greater good of the society. If they do not follow up, again from my experience over the years, the moment it is over, once you say, okay, look, we're going to have a 3-4 day this week, a committee has been set up to reform the agricultural sector, and then you meet in Abuja from Monday to Thursday. The moment you part, hardly do stakeholders congregate among themselves, to share notes, to know what is going on. Everybody goes his way. And it's only when the next meeting is set that you ask them to find, when they now arrive, ordinary minutes of the last meeting, very few people go through the minutes to even know, what was discussed. It's only at the meeting, the next meeting, they now say, let's have half an hour, let everybody read, what was the minute that was, sent to him earlier on. And in the process, you now start discussing, I said here, I didn't say so and so and so forth. But no, it is very, very key and important that if a stakeholder in the reform process, you have to continuously engage colleagues, parties, and partners in the reform exercise, even outside the official period allocated for the reform process. Next slide. Stakeholders should be strategists, indeed master strategists. You see, they should evolve strategies that can effectively influence the outcome of the reform process. If you have a promoter, and I give an example, at the time we were trying to do the telecommunication reform as a member of the National Council of Privatization, we assembled the members of then NITEM. The current governor of Kaduna State was the DG, last FI was the DGBP at the time. We met with staff of NITEM, and we told them, we said, look, listen, government was trying to reform the telecom sector. By reforming the telecom sector, we are going to bring in new players. But there are two possibilities. Either you reform yourselves or you allow Nitel to be acquired by a core investor, or you fossilize. Unfortunately, the labor movement that was representing Nitel staff on the committee went on, I can say, fratricidal, voyage, and every attempt at making them see reason that, look, if you do not accept the reform process, Nitel will go, under. They refused. Instead of them to come out with a strategy and see how they could be relevant in the, post-privatization Nitel. What happened therefore? After almost 1 year, we tried to engage with the staff, they refused. And I remember the last meeting we had with them. We told them, we said, look, by 2001, then President Obasanjo had said he was tired of the difficulty that Nitel officials, were bringing onto the table. Therefore, he already started thinking about issuing out, granting out license to mobile telecom operators. We had the last meeting with them. We told them, Nitel, if you as stakeholders in the telecom sector do not see reason with what government is trying to do, we as Nigerians are stakeholders and shareholders in the Nitel process. But be careful. What is going to happen is that the government is going to issue out telecom licenses, mobile telecom licenses that will come in. And at the end of the day, nobody will have a need for your services. The chairperson of that Nitel body at that time rose and said, no, that Nitel has the most of the infrastructure for telecoms in this country, and therefore they were sure they will succeed. And I told them, I said, if you understand the mobile telecommunication technology, which is digital, you will be left with all the underground cables, and nobody will have any use for it. Quite unfortunate that today, Nitel is there, dead, and nothing has happened to it. So that's the reason why stakeholders must evolve strategies that can influence the outcome of the reform process. That was exactly also what the IOCs did with the petroleum sector reform. They simply, because they are far more ahead, are far more appreciative of the role of the stakeholders. They were stakeholders in the petroleum sector. They had strategies to frustrate the petroleum reform because they knew that the moment Nigeria, in legislative framework comes into being, that will enable Nigeria to become an oil and gas producing country, they no longer have business. Therefore, they were gone. So they evolved a strategy to ensure that they frustrated, the reform agenda. That is the reason why up to today, from the year 2000, April, up to 2017, the petroleum sector reform has not come to pass. And my fear is, I doubt very much, if in the next 30 years, if you continue on the path we are going, that the petroleum sector reform will succeed. Albert Einstein once said, you do not solve a problem with the mindset that created it. The truth of the matter is, the PGIB that the Senate claimed it passed will go nowhere. Again, because of the method, because the stakeholders that are involved in that reform agenda understand clearly the consequences of reforming the oil and gas sector, and they will never allow it to work. The same thing as the stakeholders that understand the consequences and the probable outcomes to their businesses of the competition and antitrust law that will not make it happen. So, now how do you stakeholders make this reform, effectively influence the outcome of the reform? One, by sharing and disseminating information through various means. The one thing that we are lucky about here and now is what Victor Hugo said, the French philosopher, who said, the greatest army in the world cannot defeat an army whose time has cannot defeat an idea whose time has come. Social media is the idea whose time has come. Therefore, one of the potent tools and strategies that stakeholders can employ in being part of a process is the use of the social media. Governments will shout who and cries over the abuse of social media, but it is going to be the single most important vehicle for social transformation in a very difficult society like Nigeria, with all its incompetencies. Stakeholders must form coalition among parties Stakeholders should never see their participation in the reform process as between us and them. They need to form coalition so that they know what other parties are thinking. Get information. They must establish mutually dependent relationships with other parties in the reform process. Let the other parties also mention this relationship with us. It is mutually beneficial to both parties. Now, stakeholders should ensure that the reform process is governed by clear rules. Often what we do, what we see in Nigeria, and from my experience, is a committee is set up to reform a sector, and nobody asks for the clear rules. Everybody just says, look, I've been appointed, and therefore, I'm only looking at my citizen allowance, I'm coming to Abuja, I'm going to stay at the Hilton, I'm going to stay this. So you stakeholders should demand, right from the onset, what are the clear rules that will govern this reform agenda. Stakeholders should also map out efficient, effective, and robust strategies for post-reform evaluation, monitoring, and implementation. You may have a reform that has taken place as part of all this, but you say, okay, fine, no problem. The reform has taken place, well, good and fine, but we will not implement it. Or even if we are going to implement it, we are not going to implement it in the manner as to achieve the desired objective. Therefore, it is very important right from the onset that stakeholders should map out efficient, effective, and robust strategies for post-reform evaluation, monitoring, and implementation. And I'm saying this before Hajiya voice. One of the greatest problems we have in Nigeria today, I was in Kano some time ago. One of our colleagues came down to Kano to meet stakeholders about ease of doing business. And I stood up and I asked the lady, do you have regulatory agencies here? She said no, that is not their objective. The objective is just entrepreneurs. They brought in the bankers, CAC, and so on and so forth. I said, well, that's where you got everything wrong. The regulatory agencies are potent forces in ensuring the success or failure of any reform agenda anywhere in the world. And I'll give you a simple example. To get an approval to carry out any business in Nigeria in the petroleum sector, you need 17 agencies. 17 agencies. Ministry of Petroleum Resources, DPR, Nigerian Content, PTDF, PPF, 17 agencies. To build just a simple petrol station, you need 17 agencies, and they'll frustrate you to the hill. Therefore, unless government ensures that post-reform implementation and monitoring by stakeholders is effectively designed and implemented, and the stakeholders monitor this, we will never succeed. You could have completed your ease of doing business reform, it will not work unless people understand that you are being monitored, and this is what Joe Abba said. Let me give you my concluding thoughts about the theme of the workshop involved. Democratic governance earns its basis and legitimacy from delegation of authority by the government to the governments. The central location of participation by representation makes it compelling that stakeholders need the pivot upon which all reform processes must stand to achieve good governance. Next slide. And finally, the citizens as primary stakeholders must ensure that the Schedule 2 of the 1999 Constitution, what is a fundamental objective and directive principle of state policy, has appropriate provisions for good governance. I went through that particular schedule, and the good governance policy is not strong enough. For reforms to work, the role of stakeholders will be to ensure that good governance does not only feature in the second schedule, but it is justiciable in Nigeria. Unless it is justiciable, they can go to court and hold the state responsible for not promoting good governance. Reforms will never work. Thank you very much for your participation.